What is up, everybody? Welcome to this edition of the Quarters Podcast. We are back this week. We're diving into one of our favorite games, this or that. This is actually we don't even say that like hyperbole. Like, we love this game. This is a lot of fun, but we are doing prospect edition. So we're looking at the 2025 NFL draft prospects, some of the top ones out there, and in the recently drafted players for that position the last few years, the classes, and we're going to compare them. Who would we rather have as a prospect? What are we looking for moving forward? And it's just going to be a lot of fun to see, like, hey, a lot of arguments. That's the fun part, especially in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. But who would you rather have, Cam Ward or Michael Penix Jr., or some of the running backs that we had, Ashton, Jeanty, Bijan? Where are we at with them? So we're going to be diving into that. We're going to be comparing these guys and talking about them here on the pod. We're excited about this one, so stick after the intro. All right, first quarter up. We're talking quarterbacks. First two guys on the board here. We're going to be going through this. We got Cam Ward, University of Miami quarterback, considered a top pick. We'll see how that plays out. We've seen this show before, but we believe he's going to be a top 5 guy. And then we're going to compare him to Michael Penix Jr., now the new starting quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. We're going to see kind of how that looks. He was the 8th overall pick in 2024, and we're going to be kind of diving into who we'd rather have here. Now, if you watch on the screen, we have some advanced stats here for you. Last year, when you're looking at Michael Penix Jr. in 2023, he had a career year for Washington, obviously led him to the national championship game, 36 passing touchdowns, over 4,900 yards. And when you're looking at turnover-worthy play, just 2.0. Big-time throw percentage, 7.3. Passing grade is 90.5. Very good. Cam Ward had a very good season this year, transferring over from Washington State, going to Miami. Didn't lead him to the playoff. Almost did. A couple bad losses there. They got close. But really, passing grade, he was higher on at 91.2. Did have the touchdowns as well. 36. He has 4,000 yards. But was a big reason why Miami was back? Question mark. I don't know. They were there. They were kind of back there. But this, I think, is a fun conversation here because it's just an interesting where these guys prospects wise are. Christian, where would you lean here? Cam Ward, Michael Penix Jr., where are you at?
This one's tough because I think there was a piece of Penix Jr.'s evaluation last year where, based on the film, there was a lot of stuff that I think Ryan Grubb really handed to Michael Penix Jr. And down the stretch, I think he really started to process the field a lot better. But most of the year, it was like, okay, he's throwing accurate deep balls, and then that's kind of the offense right now. And that's a really good quality to have. Yeah. But I would say that what Cam Ward has shown this year makes this a pretty interesting conversation. I think, they've both been in college quite a while, but Penix, because of the injuries, he was a little bit older than Cam Ward when he was coming out. I think Penix certainly enters as the starter this upcoming week as a more ready player. But I think if I'm looking for an upside play, and I typically evaluate these guys with upside included, I think you have to. Yeah. I think I'd rather have Cam Ward because I think Penix is going to be a really, really good quarterback at the NFL level, but I think that there's an outside chance that Cam Ward can be even better than that. So based on my grading, it's Cam Ward. I did like Penix though. Man, I liked Penix to the year before, maybe a little bit more even after.
You did.
He had a almost 5,000 passing yard year. I wish he would have come out that year. I think he would have been a first rounder then, but he bet on himself. It worked out. Now he's a starting quarterback as a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, I think Penix fell in a weird spot for us last year where it was the age and injury concerns. I think a lot of stuff just kind of pushed him down the board to where we wouldn't necessarily pick him at 8th overall. But I believe we both had him as an NFL starter, like in our grading scale. And I think that kind of speaks to it where we know in the right system, he can plop in and really kind of take over. And I think he can do that for this Falcons team. I do think it's fun and interesting that they're putting him in against the easiest competition they're having all year in this last stretch here. I think that was I'm not necessarily on board with the decision fully. I think that part of it's smart to give him a chance to show that he's worth kicking Kirk to the curb. But besides that, I do think Cam Ward just gives you a bit more upside. I think that for me is the difference, especially if you're looking at it from somewhat of a fantasy aspect. I think Ward really pushes that up the board with that rushing upside. But just when I'm trying to pick a quarterback to try and put you in the next, upper echelon, if Michael Penix was in this draft, I think I still would take Cam Ward over Penix simply for the upside.
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to take Penix, and that's weird for me to say because I was not like a Penix guy. I was kind of because Christian actually liked Penix 2 years ago. Like before he came out last year, like Christian was actually on him higher, and then all of a sudden, like it's funny when Christian's early on a guy, he falls out of love with the guy later. Like it's like this weird
Drew Aller coming soon. I'm gonna hate that kid next year. No, I'm just kidding. I won't. But maybe.
I do think so we have more numbers here. I mean, so Cam Ward has statistically, man, this kid is something. 17,000 yards passing, 64% completion percentage, 155 touchdowns, 37 interception ratio. Penix though, 13,000 yards, 63% completion percentage there. And I think he's going to do well with what he does and what they ask him to do. I think he could get the ball out quick. I think throwing over the middle is the thing I'm most interested to see from Michael Penix Jr. Like, how's that going to be? But he does have the weapons, although I don't think we can count Kyle Pitts as a weapon anymore. I don't know what's going on. But he's got London, he's got Bijan. And I do think that, there is something to note with what he did with that. Like he took Washington to the national championship. And I do go back to that. He performed really well there. They had a good offense, but that defense wasn't great last year for Washington when he took them there. He had to perform. He beat Oregon twice. And Bo Nix, look what Bo Nix is doing, and look what that offense has done as well. And he wins, and the only loss he had was against the Michigan team that was much better. And they were very good defensively, but there a couple breaks that way. That game was close. He had a shot there. Cam, to me, I think Michael Penix Jr. is decision making is better. I think that he can get the ball quick. I think he can read the offense better. I think those are the things that I like for him. So I'm leaning him, even though before I know I was down on Michael. It's funny because I loved Cam Ward before everybody 3 years ago, and now I'm just throwing dirt on him as well. The Christian here, but I think Michael Penix Jr. I really do. I think that moving forward, I'd rather have him as my quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's totally fair. And you mentioned the decision making, and that's the thing that really holds me back from really liking Ward. It scares me a lot. That said, this was his first year. I mean, Washington State is a football team that plays.
Hey, don't be hating on the Pac-12. The Pac-12 was good last couple of years before that.
It was, but the defenses weren't. And so I think this year we really got to see Cam Ward against some strong-ish defenses at times. They played a couple tough teams, but still, there's still 2 to 3 boneheaded decisions every single game. Whereas Penix got rid of that in his final year, where he wasn't making those stupid decisions. He might throw a pick every once in a while, just get kind of confused by the coverage. But Cam Ward is actively choosing to throw crossbody from the sideline over the middle of the field. Michael Penix never did things like that. So I guess that's where. I wouldn't be shocked if you're right here, Kevin, and Penix does have the longer career and is the better player. But just, the upside, man, the upside with Ward, that's Kevin, you're the one that put me on to Cam Ward's upside. I didn't always see it, especially from the Incarnate Ward film, but obviously that wasn't fun to watch anyway because he was the best player out there. But the Washington State film was inconsistent too. So hopefully, his NFL days are actually his best play.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. I think with Ward, and how can you not love watching Incarnate Ward film? It was awesome out there watching him run for 50 yards backwards and then throwing a ball cross body and still scoring a touchdown. That's probably where he got a lot of his bad habits too, if we're going to be honest here with where he picked him up at. It wasn't great. All right, let's move to the next one. Future Raider, Shedeur Sanders. We're going to go Shedeur Sanders here. Out of Colorado, and we're matching him up with JJ McCarthy. And I think this is interesting because JJ hasn't played and he won't play play this year. So this is basically a prospect base, like, hey, just kind of like was with Penix Jr. as well, because he just got the start. So let's talk about Shedeur. What has Shedeur done this year? 4-year starter. We saw that. Overall, just when you look at his 2024 year, 3,900 yards passing, 35 touchdowns. He gets JJ there in terms of their prospects and what they did. Totally different offenses, though, from a Michigan and Colorado perspective of what they were trying to run. Big time throw percentage, 5.1. Turnover worthy play, 1.1 for Shedeur, which part of that I think is how many times he throws the football. But hey, he still has it there. 90.7 passing grade. On the flip side with JJ, when you're thinking of him, 2 years a starter basically. That year he won a national title in 2023, 2,900 yard passing yards, 22 touchdowns. Big time throw percentage though, 5.9, 87.3 passing grade. So overall, when you look at just the numbers are always going to lean to Shedeur, because just what that offense looks like and what's there. The intangible stuff, though, for JJ and the upside for JJ is what everybody's enticing about. They like that about him. And then seeing what Sam Darnold's done this year for the Vikings, you would imagine that JJ can slip in there because the prospect that he can be there. I know I'm a homer, so I know exactly where I'm leaning. So I'm going to wait until these guys go. But, Randy, where are you leaning with these guys? Your future quarterback, Shedeur Sanders for the Raiders. Where are you leaning?
It's a very weird one for me. Especially when you put in the context of going to the Raiders, where we have no idea what that offense is going to be this next year. So we don't even know what Shedeur's really going to be doing with that. But obviously Shedeur's more prolific, and it's obvious that was going to happen. I think a lot of the question marks with JJ is because of how run heavy this Michigan offense is.
Yeah.
He is going to an offense, obviously, in Minnesota that does want to focus on the run, doesn't really get the opportunity to right now. So maybe they are looking to draft a running back early to help the system. But I think they both do a very good job of making the big throws when they need to. And I think that was my biggest thing with JJ going into the draft, where maybe some of the tape, some of the intent, all the little things, as just throwing the ball at every window. You don't always love a JJ because he doesn't get the opportunity to show it. But on third down, it was always the right read. It was always the right throw on the right spot at the right time. It always made sense. And I think we saw a lot of leaps and bounds with Shedeur Sanders this year in that department. A lot of better decision-making, a lot of more he's comfortable back there, even with the up and down offensive line is the best case scenario, I'll say there. I think the playmakers around him helped, but obviously he's got one true playmaker and a few guys that can probably play at the next level around him at Colorado. I do think I just saw so much from Shedeur this year in growth that I really didn't expect. I think just on the field quarterback play, I think I would take Shedeur because I think he can play in more systems. However, as a leader, and if I had one drive, I'd pick JJ.
Yeah, man, that's a pretty good way to put it. I think I've been called a Shedeur hater quite a bit. I think there have been times when Shedeur's film is very much game manager-esque, but that's exactly what JJ McCarthy made his money on. So these two players are very similar in that regard. I think Shedeur's probably more accurate to all three levels. I think JJ was certainly really, really accurate in that short to intermediate area, and the deep ball came and went at times. My main concern with Shedeur is sacks and turndowns. JJ McCarthy didn't have a whole lot of turndowns because he didn't have too many opportunities to show that he had them. Knowing what we know now, where JJ McCarthy won't have an opportunity for turndowns just based on what that Minnesota offense is going to look like, I think I feel really good about his future. I feel pretty good about Shedeur. I have them, for what it's worth, I have these two players within 0.5 in my 100-point grading scale. And I do have JJ McCarthy 0.5 ahead. And part of that, I don't have any necessarily knocks about Shedeur's maturity anymore. I think a lot of people have dispelled that, but I also think that there's still some concern there, and I think teams are certainly going to vet that a little bit. This is a really tight one, though. I think these are two starting quarterbacks at the NFL level for a pretty long time. I think I would bet on JJ McCarthy, though, before I bet on Shedeur.
Yeah, I mean, Shedeur's my QB1 right now, which is a change in terms, because I think Alder's going back. So don't come kill me, Christian. But I do think, with Shedeur there, I think JJ, wasn't my QB1 last year, but if JJ would came out this year, he'd be my easy QB1. And so I lean JJ just because, like Randy said, JJ has it. Like, there's an it factor there. Numbers guys aren't gonna like that it thing, but like he has that. He drives, and look what Michigan's offense looked like this year without him. Like, their quarterback was a mess. Like, look at that team, and I know they lost a lot of guys, but JJ has that it factor, and he does it very well. He's had it since high school. I mean, I pretty much watched more tape at games of JJ than anybody else. Like, I've watched this kid a lot. And he just has that, but I think Shedeur can be fine too. But I do think Randy's point. I joke because he's a Raiders fan, but like they really got to build around this kid. Like, I think JJ. The nice thing is he has the best wide receiver in the history of the Vikings for sure, and we might go down for the top 3 ever. Like, Justin Jefferson is that great. So when you think of that, like, who's Shedeur gonna have? If he gets Brock, he has one of maybe the best tight end, like pushing in the next 10 years there. So he's going to have that there. So I think this is a fun one because they're very similar, actually. It's funny how you go through it. Like, the numbers might not be similar, but the play style and what they are as quarterbacks are definitely close. Like, so it's fun there. Let us know in the comments. Drop it below. Like, well, who would you rather have based on that? That's why we're doing this here. All right, we're going to jump over to the second quarter. We're going to talk a little running back. So this is a fun one. We're starting off the gate hot here. We're going Ashton, Jeanty. Runner-up Heisman. Runner-up Heisman out there for Travis Hunter won it. 5'9", 215 out of Boise State. Obviously, I mean, numbers-wise, he's just phenomenal. He's going to win on all these. Rush grade this year for PFF, 97.5. Yards after contact per attempt, 5.48. Breakaway percentage, 53.7, 2,400 rushing yards, and just going to go up as he goes through the playoff, and then 29 rushing touchdowns. And then we got Bijan Robinson. Obviously, he was the consensus guy, running back 1 in 2023. He was the dude there, 18 rushing touchdowns, 1,500 yards. Breakaway was at 38.6, yards after contact, 4.17, and then 96.1 running game. Now, I want to tell you guys, that's a really good numbers that we just said it. Like, Jeanty's just done something phenomenal this year, but for him to do that also in the Big 12 on that stage, we've seen that. So when you're looking at kind of Bijan and what he's been able to do in 2022, obviously 2023 he played for the Falcons, he's been good. He's been special. He's been fine for them. Like, I think he's warranted that first round capital. The Falcons have just kind of been a mess in terms of the quarterback position there. But this is a fun conversation here because I think, Chris, you have a rank higher, right? You have Jeanty as a prospect ranked higher than Bijan?
I do. And I think there's going to be a lot of debate about this because Bijan
Which is
did
crazy. Crazy, by the way. I'm just going to say you're crazy.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I mean, I think coming into this year, I had concerns about Ashton Jeanty's weight and then the corresponding contact balance. I didn't know if it would hold up against, higher level athletes. The level of competition is certainly a scare away when you haven't seen proof of dominance, but we've seen proof of dominance against the number 1 team in the country from Ashton Jeanty this year. And I do caution folks. A lot of folks are going to say, well, he doesn't have the receiving profile, so he's not as well-rounded as Bijan. But then you look at the career stats, and actually he's a more prolific receiver in college than Bijan was. And quite frankly, these are my 2 highest graded running backs of all time, and they're within not of all time. I haven't been doing this for very long, for what it's worth, like the grading actually. So 6, 7, 8 years, however long it's been. If I were back grading Barry Sanders, it might be a little bit different, but I'm not that old. But these are the 2 that stand above the rest too. I think they're within like 2 points of each other or something like that. But to me, Jeanty has basically taken every doubt that I had and just wiped it away entirely. And this is a top 5 player in this class to me, where Bijan was up there too in his class. Like, he was a very, very talented running back. And I still think that the best years are ahead of both of these guys. But man, if I'm starting a franchise, I think both of them have like really good character as well. They're really good leaders, but the things that I've seen from Jeanty, especially through this Heisman campaign, have been remarkable stuff. So I don't have a grade for that, but that would be a separator if they were directly tied. And I lean Jeanty here, which might be crazy,
Yeah, I think what people are going to get bogged down on is Jeanty not being used in the passing game this year. And it's just a shift in the offense. And honestly, just him not being on the field for a few quarters from him just being so dominant. I am curious, Christian, I don't know if you have pulled up Do you know what his grade is? Or I'd assume, what's his production grade for Jeanty? Because I know Bijan's. See, that's what I think is going to be. You said it's a 2-point difference. I know Bijan's was a 7 for our grading scale. Okay. So I think that's what is going to catapult Jeanty over Bijan for me, which I did not think was going to be possible for how much I love Bijan Robinson. And I think that's kind of I think that's kind of the end of the day. I think Bijan does give you a bit more versatility. So I'll still take Bijan, and that's probably just blinders of me just absolutely loving Bijan Robinson. But Jeanty is just so special. I think, because obviously Bijan had to compete with Gibbs in his class. It's one of those, those three together in a class, it would be a dogfight of people trying to pick who they thought was the best running back, because it's just three of the best backs we've seen in forever, and they're so recent. And I think that's going to be a little bit of a issue for a lot of people trying to get everything and trying to pick who they like the best. But Jeanty, I do think, is just very special in every kind of running scheme. It's just, I think Bijan, with his receiving ability, actually being able to line up and everything, is just a bit more versatile.
That's fair.
I have a hot take with Jeanty. I don't
know.
I like Jeanty, but I do think he's getting that production bump in the Mountain West is a problem. And I've watched more Mountain West than probably all of you, because I out here at Fresno State. Those defenses are just simply not good. Now, he did do good against Oregon, and I know he had that game where you're like, hey, he did, and we'll see in the playoff. He hasn't had it yet, so we'll see kind of how that looks. I think Bijan was a better prospect. I think Jahmyr Gibbs was a better prospect than Ashton Jeanty. I would have taken Gibbs over Jeanty too. I just would have. So I can't sit here and take Jeanty over Bijan, because I do think Bijan. I mean, we also have the sample set already, right? The last 2 seasons, he had 1,000 yards finally this year, 8 touchdowns, so he's looked good. And I think that you build an offense around Bijan. I think you're comfortable with that. I think they have. Jeanty, though, I don't know. There's so many good running backs in this class, in the 25 class for running backs. I think with Bijan and Gibbs, you were clearly taking those guys in top 15, even though Gibbs was kind of a what the hell did they just do kind of pick with the Lions. Jeanty, though, I have a hard time in my mocks fitting him to a team in the top 15. I have a hard time with that, because I'm and I know teams are dumb, so they're going to take him top 10, just because of the running back value, not because Jeanty's not a good player. So don't yell at me out there in the comments. But it's hard for me when I look at it, hey, where does he fit in? Where does he slot in with these guys? The running back values there. I think Jeanty's a very good player. Obviously, he's done it, but I am going to be an elitist. Everybody knows me in the Discord. I am a college football elitist, and if you're not playing for the SEC or Big Ten, I am a dick like that. I do take that to account. I just do. And I know there's been running backs. Everybody's going to throw out the Aaron Jones. Everybody's going to throw out kind of the small school guys, and I get that. And Jeanty almost won the Heisman, so I can't just throw it against them. But so did Jonathan Taylor. So did some of these other guys. Malcolm Gordon almost won the Heisman in his career. What did he turn out to be? So, there is part of that as well. So I'm going to lean Bijan, because I just think I think Bijan was always a unicorn, and from his freshman year on, he was always that. I don't think Jeanty was always a unicorn as a prospect, so I lean Bijan here.
Yeah, it's totally fair. The one caveat to the production argument that I would put on it is Texas had a passing attack too. They had Xavier Worthy, they had Quinn Ewers, and this Boise State passing attack has been fine, but it is very much so a supplement of the rushing attack.
Yes.
You don't like Madsen? Come on.
He didn't say that.
Listen, he does some fine things when everything is open for him, because every team has 8 to 9 in the box against Jeanty, whereas Bijan didn't always see that. And so I think there's some level of okay, you get him in front of an NFL front, and I think they both have exceptional vision, and they set up their blocks really, really well. And they both did as prospects too. Bijan was fantastic at that. But I think there's just so much versatility once you get Ashton Jeanty in light boxes. I see a Saquon Barkley type player. And maybe I would have had Bijan Robinson over Saquon. I don't think we put this grading scale on Saquon. So, maybe it, like I said, it's very, very close. So I don't hate even saying that Gibbs was ahead of him. Gibbs has a very special trait in that speed, and maybe Jeanty doesn't have that in some folks' eyes, but it's worth an argument, I think, which is cool for a Boise State running back, I think.
Yeah, and also small caveat, Bijan was always splitting the backfield.
That's true. That's true.
Well, that's just because Texas coaching staff's down. Like,
Yeah, I mean, there's 3 good backs in that
It was.
scheme. So
yeah. Well, 2.5. I don't know if Roshan Johnson was ever like a great back.
Ask fantasy football Twitter, and they'll tell you he's elite.
Well, I draw the line at like my knowledge of fantasy football Twitter, like when I'm asking them questions like that. Like I don't know, like if that's really where I'm going. All right, next running backs. Let's go to the next ones. Omarion Hampton. We're just gonna stick with North Carolina here, folks. Omarion Hampton versus Javonte Williams. So there's tons of running backs, and you could probably have like 7 guys running back 2 if you really wanted to. You can make an argument. Caleb Johnson, for example. We're gonna get some Iowa fans really upset when they watch this. But we just chose Hampton. Mainly, when you think of the production, he's considered a top 50 pick. Some people do have him as running back too, myself. But like when you're looking at what he's done this year, PFF run grade 88.8, 4.35 yards after contact per attempt, breakaway percentage is 43.9, 1,660 yards rushing, 15 touchdowns. The man did it, just earning like $600K on NIL. Come on, North Carolina, open up the books. Now that Belichick's there, they're going to open it up there. And then Javonte, though, people forget in 2020 with his stats, he was legit in college football. Like 19 rushing touchdowns, 1,100 yards, 4.59 yards after contact. That was his big thing, his yards after contact per attempt, the things that he's able to do. 95.5 run grade. So he kind of checks the boxes there. Breakaway percentage, he also hit that. He was the 35th overall pick. Now, his NFL career has not worked out. He had the injuries that really kind of threw him off. The Broncos, the spot. But as a prospect, I think this is a fun comp with how these guys are, especially because like Hampton did pretty good. They both had kind of similar breakouts. Now, Javonte was a 1-year breakout from what I can remember. I'm pretty sure he's that 1-year big breakout. Hampton has had production for the last couple of years. But this is a fun one. Randy, where are you leaning with these 2 guys?
Yeah, Javonte kind of had 2 years. I think what makes it more impressive for Javonte, at least in the college career, is it was truly a dual backfield with Michael Carter. So the numbers are kind of crazy for having a pure split backfield. And the only thing really Hampton has on him is receiving game right now. And that's literally because of Michael Carter taking away those touches in college for Javonte. We had Javonte graded really high, Christian higher than me even. And I thought his vision and especially the cut ability to get to the next level and really make plays was very electric in college. I thought he deserved the 35th pick. And I do think his college tape is just very, very good and showed a very electric superstar. Hampton has shown that at times the North Carolina offense in comparison of these 2 teams for North Carolina is night and day, in my opinion, with just the quarterback play, the other running backs in the system, the wide receivers. They probably have a better tight end with Nesbitt. But other than that, I think Hampton really is carrying this team, and I do think he is deserving of being in consideration of the running back too. But just from the college tape so far, I have to take Javonte.
Yeah, I'm also on the Javonte train, and I think the main differentiator for me is wiggle and ability to make guys miss lateral agility, because I think Omarion Hampton is certainly a guy that's going to run through you, and I think that there's a ton of contact balance there. But if you need hit to make a guy miss in space, I would take college Javonte over most backs. He was my RB1 that year. I was super, super high on him. I think he was my RB1 heading into that year, honestly. I was just super, super into that film. Even like the sophomore year film for Javonte was like, it showed everything that we saw in that final year. When you look at like some of the PFF elusive ratings, for example. So 2023 for Omarion Hampton, 116.3, 2024, 120.0, 2019 for Javonte, 140.6, and then 2020, 215.4. So just an incredibly evasive, elusive type of back that could make you miss in multiple ways because the contact balance was still all there for Javonte. So I would call it bias just because I was super high on Javonte. Omarion Hampton is still a very good back. I think he's, in this grading scale, he's within 3 to 4 points of Javonte, but Javonte hits that like quality NFL starter. And I think without injuries, we would have seen that. I hope that Omarion Hampton maybe changes my mind a little bit, but I just have him as a regular NFL starter. We're taking away the quality from Omarion, sadly.
He doesn't. I'm gonna lean Omarion because we're just gonna fight today. That's just how we're gonna go there. You guys are perfectly like your arguments in terms of like the lack of wiggle is 100%. Like Hampton does not have that. Like Hampton is very like contact balance, north south, very minimum waste of movement. There's times where I'm like, man, just tempo your speeds a little bit, like just like find that zone and kind of burst. We don't see that as much as we do with Javonte. I do think Omarion's running style though might be better for his long-term outlook than Javonte's was. Like I do think he could fit an offense better. I have a fun comp for Omarion Hampton. You guys know. Christian knows I freaking hate comps, and I'm old. So have you guys ever watched Tiki Barber run?
Oh yeah.
Omarion Hampton runs like Tiki Barber a little bit. Like he really
like a 90s 2000 running back.
Yes, he does. Like he runs like it a little bit. Like and not the stupid like how he had to hold the ball all the time, but just like that. Like doesn't have a ton of wiggle, but does get up north and south, and then can make a guy miss if he needs to. Like it's nothing special though. It's nothing like it pops off. So your production, you're great in terms of like just a starter. That makes sense. But I just, the production's been there. And I think I come back to that production, what he's been able to do. I think he has enough. He's a violent guy, though. When you watch his tape, you're just like, man, this kid's violent. He explodes through the alleyway. Like he gets to the line of scrimmage, he can explode through. And I do think he's a good pass catcher, too. Like Javonte's much better. Like Javonte was much better at that. And I do think he had better hands. But he's a sure guy. Like to me, he's a day 2 starter. Like, hey, I'm going to put him in there. Maybe Javonte was higher. I was not as high on Javonte as Christian was. That's when we first started talking about these guys. So that's probably where it leans back to a little bit of bias there. But I lean Hampton there. I think it's extremely close, though. Like, and I do think maybe his lack of NFL production maybe is bias a little bit. Throw some biases in there. But I lean Hampton. I think he's violent, man. And he just reminds you of Tiki a lot.
For what it's worth, me and Christian, this was probably the longest conversation we had about who to compare because we came up with like 5 running backs, and I did want to do Brian Robinson Jr. because I thought that was the closest to pure comp in style, and I do think I would lead Hampton over Robinson pretty easily. I wasn't the biggest fan of Robinson. I'm still not. I think he does exactly what I thought he would.
Well, and we had talked about maybe doing Najee Harris as well, and I think Hampton there. I mean, he's just a big bruising type of guy, and Najee's a fine starter, and Kevin called us haters of Najee, and I think he'll probably get paid and be a starter for a long time because he has that build and he's able to sustain those hits. That's a very valuable quality that we don't talk about a ton with running backs, but it matters for sure.
Yeah. After that fumble we had, he lost the Eagles. I'm out of the Najee train. You son of a gun. All you got to do is beat the freaking Eagles, but you just yeah.
Really good.
Thanks for ruining it for me, Najee Harris. I had your back, and then look at what you did. You threw my ass under the bus. I appreciate you, buddy. All right, let's go to the wide receivers. Let's talk about it. Everybody loves wide receivers. That's their thing. So we have 2 kind of top guys considered. We didn't put Travis Hunter in here because, to be quite honest with you, I didn't want to compare him to Deion Sanders. We're not doing that today. So
PFF didn't grade back then, so
PFF wasn't alive back then. They're little babies. But we got Tetairoa McMillan. Arizona wide receiver, 6'5", 212. His 2024 stats really good. 1,300 yards, 8 touchdowns, a 61.3 catch percentage, yards per route run. He's sitting at 2.87, receiving grade 85.2. And he's kind of considered the top 10 wide receiver out there in terms of the draft coming up, that he's going to be a pick and number 1 overall. I don't know a ton of people that have anybody else but McMillan at 1. There are some Travis Hunter ones out there for some people, but really it's McMillan. Then we compare him over to Drake London, USC wide receiver, 8th overall pick in 2022. Feels like he's been in the league a lot longer than as long as he has, because people have been talking about him. But that year, so 2021 stats, 7 touchdowns in college, 1,000 receiving yards, 65.4 catch percentage. He beats Tet there. Yards per route run, 3.52, which is really good. He beat him there, and in 91.8 receiving grade, he had him there. This is a fun conversation because 6'4", 213, pretty good size. He's going to be compared a lot to Tet. Gets compared to Drake and Mike Evans. He's like a mixture of those 2 guys in there. Where you love Drake London, Christian, so I'm interested to see kind of where you lean on this one. Where are you going?
Yeah, first that's contested catches too. I don't actually have their catch percentages on there. Abbreviations are stupid.
Yeah. I was gonna say
But
career we have Ted is 62.5 reception percentage and 74.1 for London.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I did love Drake London. I was super high on Drake London, and I'm still leaning Tet here. Drake London, I was one of those advocates where everyone made Drake London to be just this contested catch type of guy that could win on vertical routes and only vertical routes. And when you watched that film, it was like, oh no, he's got some wiggle on the underneath stuff. Like he can get open, he can run routes, but when I watch Tet, there's more of that, and I think there's more after the catch, and that's really, really the separator. Is Ted McMillan is a creative with the ball in his hands, more creative than he's at least given credit for, but also B, I think he's a little more violent with the ball in his hands too. Yeah. I think Drake London is still a very, very good wide receiver that is going to have a long career. There's a reason that he was the first wide receiver drafted in that class, and that was a really, really good class. Tet has the benefit of this is not a good wide receiver class. This is a pretty atrocious wide receiver class, especially once you get pretty deep. But to me, Tet's year this year would have rivaled Drake London if he had a quarterback. Noah Fafita was really, really rough this year. And Tet really was the offense. They ran the offense through him. And if teams were able to kind of shadow cover him, he had to be taken out of games and they had to win in other ways, but he was still dominant. So I think this was your Biletnikoff winner for what it's worth. I do not think Travis Hunter was the Biletnikoff winner. I think that's the craziest one. If he wins the Heisman, I get it. He's a two-way player, but the Biletnikoff, you can't sell me on that. I think Tet McMillan is the best wide receiver in college football right now, and I think he's pretty much locked in to be a top 10 pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I'm also going Ted. I know in the grading scale for us, I had Drake as a quality NFL starter, top end of it, so just under the next level, which I believe is all pro for us. And that's at the preliminary that I have, I think Ted is going to be pretty comfortably in there and be one of the better players I've scouted. He's not going to be my favorite receiver ever, just simply because I'm definitely, and I'm such a route running slut. And he's not, he's up there, but he's not the greatest necessarily. So I just think Ted gives you a bit more of everything. And I just, again, like you said, he had probably better numbers last year, but the quarterback play has really disappointed him this year. And the same thing with Luther Burden too, for fairness. I just think Ted has been a lock in the top 10 going into this draft and just cemented it. I just think we get a little bit more. I think we're closer to like a top end Mike Evans, Calvin Johnson type of receiver here, where Drake London is just a very good up to all pro level wide receiver.
I think people don't give Ted enough credit for just how smart he is as a receiver too. Like he does a lot of things that like people don't necessarily recognize in there, and I think that he can be a top 5 guy. Like if he pans out and depending on where he goes. Or Drake, I like Drake. I everyone thinks I'm a noted hater of Drake London on YouTube. You guys always drop in like comments about him to me, and I think he's fine. But I think he's a very solid 2 with like wide receiver 1 like floor. Like he can do it. He goes out there, he has those games that you see there. But Ted just is a better prospect to me. Like I think if you were looking for like what could Drake's ceiling be, it's Ted. And then what could Tet's ceiling be? It could be like a top 5 guy. Like it's like Mike Evans Hall of Fame type thing. Like I think that's kind of how you lean with these guys here. I just think Tet's a better prospect. I think he's a better receiver. I think production wise, I think he can play inside out too. Like he has that ability. He's quick enough off the line to kind of be in the slot too. I think he creates separation well enough. And like he said, if he had a better freaking quarterback this year, I think we're talking about him being a Heisman candidate. Like I think Ted could have kind of went and done that because that offense was just a mess. Had they still had, obviously, hindsight 2020, but their coach leaving for Washington, they should have went somewhere else. Like he could have went to Alabama. He had an offer to go to Alabama, NIL, and even with Milroe there, I mean, they could have done something special. Him, Ryan Williams, like he's in that category. And yeah, he should have won the Receiver of the Year award. There's no question about it. So I like Drake, but I Tet's ceiling, man, I'm all about it because I do think that he could be special.
Are you worried that when the combine rolls around and he's like 6'3.5", 198 or something crazy, would you have a different opinion of him if that happened, I guess?
No, I think he's still wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
And I think that he's Drake, right? Like, I think that he could, then maybe you go down because like the measurables was Drake being 6'4", 213. Maybe he's a little less than that. But I've always comped to Mike Evans. So that's my comp for him. Like, I've always thought that was the guy where he's at. So like, obviously the books might be cooked a little bit on the size. We'll see. Maybe he'll stretch out his arms a little bit and tip his toes.
I always, for that, like, I think folks have a right to like question it. I do it all the time because they do cookbooks, but on 24/7 Sports as a recruit, he was listed at 6'4". So like,
yeah,
you're telling me you didn't grow an inch and after you turned 18, like I feel like that probably happened.
Well, I didn't. Like I didn't grow anything.
That's fair. The weight is what I'm worried about. Yeah.
The weight is the
key. One ball joke a show. I'm sorry, I had to.
It's fair. The weight, I mean, if he comes in under 200, then I might have a tad different opinion, but I don't think he will. I think he'll be in that 205, 210 range.
Yeah, and I do think he plays big, especially on the outside. There's watching the tape, there's really not like an aspect. I'm like, oh God, like he's got to improve on that. And I do think Drake at times needed a little bit better routing and separation. But for the most part, he was just so talented too. It's just he was also in a class with Garrett Wilson, who was a very good route runner. So he never had a chance to be in the top receiver for me.
That's fair.
Yeah, no, 100%. All right, we're gonna piss off all the truthers in our next episode or our next part here. We got Luther Burden, Missouri wide receiver, coming out of the draft. This year, kind of a down year this year. So considered a first rounder. Some have him at 2, some at 3. He was most people's 1 heading into the season over Tetairoa McMillan. Receiving grade 80.3 yards per out run, sitting there at 2.32. And that's where that production comes from, right? 676 yards and 6 receiving touchdowns this year. So definitely had a down year, definitely inconsistent this year. When you look at Odunze from Washington, who we're comparing him to, the 9th overall pick in 2024, people love Rome. Rome is like, I don't know, they attach themselves to Rome. I think that part of the Washington thing there. And he obviously had a great 2021. 1,600 yards receiving, 13 receiving touchdowns. 1,300 would be a hell of a year. Yards per out run, 2.93, 89.5 receiving grade. Obviously was playing with Michael Penix Jr., Polk, Jalen McMillan. They went to the national title game. He had that run there for him. But I don't know. When you're just looking at the numbers and everything there, like it's closer than people think, especially when you look at dominatory rating when he was a freshman for Luther Burden. Rome was kind of a late bloomer-ish, like when you're thinking of like his prospect profile. Luther came out ready to go. I do think the offense in Missouri this year was a little tougher for him, and definitely inconsistent at times. Like it's a little bit of Luther's fault too. It's not just that offense, the quarterback with Cook and everything there. But Randy, where are you going with these two?
Yeah, the one thing obviously the quarterback situation for these two guys is wildly different. So I think that's a caveat of it. But I think Rome is my pick between the two simply because I do think he can kind of go all over. I think he's good in the slot. I think he can be dominant outside. Where Luther, especially this year, most of his production, it just felt like he just couldn't get it done the outside. I think that's a lot on the quarterback, just the whole offense. I do really like Luther Burden, but something that's really big for me is seeing the continued growth, and we did every year see that growth from Odunze. We haven't necessarily seen that from Luther. We saw an enormous jump last year, and then kind of regression back to 2-3 years ago this year, unfortunately. And one thing I saw with Rome, which we talked about a lot on our previous show, was Rome did such a good job of getting that extra trait of being able to throttle down his routes and explode out of breaks. And I just have not seen that on a consistent basis from Luther Burden. And I think that is such an essential trait to be an elite receiver. Because I do think at times I've seen better routes from Luther Burden, but there's so many of the little just smartness and the IQ of the position and little traits like that. And the throttle difference is such a huge leap that it has to be Rome for me. Because that was something that Rome went from a day 2 guy for me going into the draft to fighting to be one of the top receiver, just simply off of the improvements. And that throttle was so impressive from a guy that really didn't show it at all the years before.
I'm with you. I'm glad you brought up the continued progression and development, because I was really low on Rome. I made arguments that Jalen McMillan was a better player going into that year, and I still think maybe he was. He was a little hurt that year, and he's coming into his own now. But Rome, to me, the two things that separate him from Luther Burden are contested catchability and just general catching the football. I do think the routes are impressive. Luther Burden has some trouble with that at times. I think we've seen that a few times. He's been more consistent the last 2 years, for what it's worth. But I think specifically in those contested situations, like, this isn't a great size weight comp, and this isn't by any means like an actual like player comp for Luther Burden. We've got different ones there, but just as far as like range of the draft goes and something recent, this one made sense. But Odunze is a big boy that can win in contested situations, whereas I just don't feel like we've seen enough from Luther Burden in those situations yet, and we never will in college. He's declared for the draft. He is in the draft, so I will come out with Rome Odunze for what it's worth. Rome Odunze had one of my highest grades. I watched every Washington game last year to really study Michael Penix and Rome Odunze, but I just came away so impressed after last year. So I lean Rome here. I think Luther Burden's a good player. I think he's in that starter realm. Rome Odunze was pushing for that All-Pro, Pro Bowl category for me.
This is a really tough one. When you're going to kind of go through, like when I was diving in with you guys too, like it's very tough. I think it's very close. I'd probably leave Rome as well. You just look at the production. You kind of like everything Christian mentioned. Like I'm gonna go Rome, and really, what's kind of threw me off a little bit about Luther this year. Inconsistency is a thing, but like just didn't look involved with that team. Like there was something off of that field. Yeah. Like, when you're watching, you're just like, it's the same thing with Isaiah Bond. It's the exact same thing that I get from him on the field. And Luther, I think, has it. Like when he turns it on, you're like, damn, this is a first round pick. Like Luther, I mean, he commands targets. He looks great out there in those big games that he had. And you're like, hey, this is the guy. But again, it's like off and on. It's hot and cold. I don't know how much he wanted to be out there. And that's the thing with Luther. It's like, hey, if he goes to the team, and I do think, like, just moving forward too, draft spot for Luther is incredibly important. Where some guys are like, oh, well, he's filling like Tetairoa, he'll go somewhere, whatever. And I know it's a cop out. Everybody says like it's important for everybody. Yeah, no shit. But what I mean for like Luther is just by scheme fit. Like when you're thinking of like, what is a team going to use for him? Because they're going to call him Debo. They're going to say all these things. And that's the other thing too. Like he's got a little George Pickens in him. Like he's got a little like that George Pickens style. So what coaching staff is he going to go to? Like how are they going to reel that in? Stephon Diggs. Yeah.
Hey, that's the name that keeps coming up. Hey, yeah. I mean, there is that. I was just going to say like, even like play style, like if Luther gets better in his routes, like maybe the best outcome is Stephon Diggs. Obviously he's getting drafted well before Diggs did. And I think he's a better athlete than Diggs, but I think maybe that's the route he goes where, he's a really good player, but now he's bouncing around teams because, some of the maybe not off field, maybe it's more the on field concerns, which, I mean, to be fair to this kid, I also would not want to play for Missouri, but that's the choice that kid made. So like, I would not want to play with Brady Cook. That kid was not good this year. I wouldn't have been happy with the direction of that offense, but still, I think you're right. I think there was definitely some disinterest on that film specifically this year, but also that freshman year when it was all over. I was panicking about Luther Burden because I thought he was a really, really good player. He turned it on sophomore year, but I'm a little worried that might be the best we ever see is that sophomore year film at Missouri.
We'll see. I don't think he's ever going to be a player with a quarterback quite as bad is
That's fair.
the thing. I think Burden gets saved a lot by last year's film, and size and weight wise, unfortunately, he's kind of like a in between Neighbors and like Corley of last year, so it wasn't really fair to match him up against either of those. But I think Rome was the good pick because this is a guy that's going to get drafted and likely going to be drafted as kind of like a 1B that they're hoping to build into a 1A because that's what Rome is.
Yeah.
He was put in a position he's supposed to be the third option, and sometimes he was the fourth, sometimes he was the first. It's been an up and down year for him for sure, but I do think that's exactly what Luther's going to need to do, and that's what Diggs did too. He was competing for that one spot in his best years, I'd say, and I do think Burden should be able to hit the ground running with a better quarterback. It's just, again, like you said, Kevin, landing spot is going to be enormous for Luther Burden, because is he just going to be stuck in the slot or is he going to be an actual weapon for an offense?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like when you're looking at like his numbers on PFF, me and Christian talked about Luther for a while because we go back and look at like his slot percentage and then his out wide percentage. They've fluctuated, so he definitely has inside outside versatility. But when you're looking at like who needs a wide receiver in the range that needs a wide receiver, the one that kind of stands out to me, and I don't know what they're going to do because it's kind of a mess on defense on that. Cincinnati, if they move on from T, and then they say, hey, we need a wide receiver, and they pair him with Chase, I would love that for Burden. Like I would love for that like area in there. Dallas could take a wide receiver, and I know they've been mocked. Christian always just likes to. If he doesn't give Dallas Jeanty, he gives them Luther Burden sometimes. So like that is a good fit though, and I think because of that inside outside versatility with CD, who does better in the slot, and with that offense, what that's going to look like. So those teams I would love, especially when Dallas gets a new head coach. I hope they do. Like that is the kind of like okay how that works. But yeah, there are definitely some red flag teams though in there. I'm like I don't want you to go to New Orleans. That's a mess. I don't want you to go to certain of these other teams. So that's definitely there. So yeah, I lean Rome too. I definitely go there. All right, we're going to finish this up. We're going to go tight ends because we can't forget about the tight ends on this show. So we're going to be talking about the tight ends here. First up, Tyler Warren. These two love Tyler Warren. So, 6'6" listed. I'd be surprised if he's 6'6", but 261. Had a really, really good year this year. Obviously, receiving grade 93.2, yards per out run 2.93, receiving yards over 1,000 yards, 6 receiving touchdowns. So we are comping him, or not comping, that was dumb. Comparing this or that to Dalton Kincaid. So 26 overall pick in 2023. People forget he was a very sought after prospect too coming out that people really like Dalton Kincaid. 8 receiving touchdowns this 2022 year in college, 890 yards, looking at his yards per route run, 2.41, 91.8 receiving grade. Randy, where are you going with these two guys? Because I know you like Warren. He's your tight end one right now. I don't know where you were at with Kincaid.
I was high, but there was a lot of question marks with Kincaid. And that was man. I want to say it's got to be Warren right now, but I was very high on Dalton Kincaid too. The thing was, he was basically tied with Laporta for me, just because I think Laporta was a bit of a better blocker, and they were both behind Michael Mayer. So simply because of that, I have to go Tyler Warren. I do think Warren is a better overall tight end.
Yeah.
And obviously the extra versatility you get, I think, he's going to – I can't wait for ESPN to talk about how he's the next Taysom Hill. It's going to be so much fun just because he does play quarterback at times, but he is an elite electric weapon on the outside. He's a true wide receiver one for the Penn State. Maybe that sets up other wide receivers that we talked about last episode. But I do think he's going to step in and be kind of what Brock Bowers is right now, where he can go into a middling wide receiver room and really be the best weapon on the team. And I don't think there's a scheme fit thing for Tyler Warren. I think he's just going to step on the field and be a weapon, where I do think Kincaid went to one of the best spots for him. It's just unfortunate that there was also a tight end that the quarterback already loved and the team already loved on the team, just not as good as him. So he's just getting into his full potential. And if he could stay healthy, I think we would have seen that unlock this year. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But just out of the jump, I'm going to have to go Tyler Warren because I do think he's going to hit the ground running.
Yeah, this one's super close for me. This one is within 0.4 in the grading scale, but it's in favor of Tyler Warren right now. Now, that could still change. Testing does go into these grades. So, like, if Tyler Warren comes out and he tests terribly, he might drop, and I might say Kincaid was graded higher. I think Kincaid is certainly the more natural pass catcher, and that's an important piece of playing tight end and being a weapon at the next level. That said, I think Tyler Warren is still very gifted at doing that. I think his routes have gotten a lot better. There was some good stuff. He was just kind of put behind a flurry of NFL tight ends at Penn State. They are kind of a new tight end over the last, maybe not even that new, but I think you can make arguments for a few different places, but he just didn't get playing time. The reason this one, was the this or that is because both these guys are going to enter the NFL or they already have at an old age. Kincaid was pushing, I think 20. I think he was 25 when he came out. I think Tyler Warren's up there. He's 23, 24. So that's an important piece of it. But what Warren has done this year, we talked about it last week, but he has been the best tight end in college football. And I think I could have made an argument that Kincaid was that year, but there were also guys that made pretty significant cases for. Michael Mayer was a real thing back then, and he was a really good college tight end. So
and Laporta was pretty electric for Iowa, which is crazy.
I forgot that was the same year.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Tucker Kraft emerging like that. It was a wild tight end class where this one necessarily is kind of the same. Whether it's kind of guys from Bowling Green or stepping up as competition, like it's a weird class, but Warren is just. They're both special, but this year from Warren is just special.
Yeah, I wasn't as high on Kincaid, so I lean Warren here to that. But I will say this with the caveat: I'll take Warren, and I like Warren. He's not my tight end one though, and everybody can kick rocks that yells at me about that. But the testing is Christian hit that on the head with him, because it'll be interesting to see where he tests that, because we do want to take testing into account. Last year, Brock didn't test. But Brock is Brock Bowers. And when Brock, when you look at what he was able to do, I think the film and everything kind of spoke to that. Warren's not in that category yet. But I swear to God, the first Taysom Hill thing I see is I'm going to lose my dang mind on that. So the testing, I think, is the key. Because I do think Kincaid is a very good receiver, and much better than Warren. But then you go back to Warren, what Randy talked about, he's a better tight end. When you're thinking of grades in terms of offensive grades, but also run blocking grade, 90.9 run blocking grade, or 75.6 run blocking grade this last year. That's great compared to Kincaid, which was sitting at 58. So you're going to see the numbers. You're going to see a little different there. I like Warren as an inline guy. I do think he could split out wide. I do think a team could really utilize him in fun, creative ways, where Kincaid is just basically your pass catcher, your guy there. That's why I kind of do lean Warren. But the caveat is the testing. That athletic testing could tell us give us some red flags in the profile, and I think we don't have those yet.
For what it's worth, Kincaid didn't test too. So
he was hurt, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Because he always is. That's the other thing. Warren's pretty reliable. He's going to be on the field. That could be the separator here.
Warren would play with a freaking separated shoulder. That kid plays. And that's the other thing too. If we're talking old school, football player, 1990 talk, Warren's that guy. Cause he's just a football guy. He's going to go there and he's going to be good to go. All right, let's wrap this up. We're going to go Colston Loveland. Michigan tied in. This last year, 2024 stats, 90.2 receiving grade, 2.67 yards per out run. Receiving yards, 582 for a very bad passing offense. I'm going to put that caveat out there. 5 receiving touchdowns. We're comparing it with Trey McBride, 55th overall pick in 2022. And people forget at Colorado State, McBride was a dude. McBride, I mean, whether it was rushing touchdowns, receiving touchdowns, kid was really good. In 2021, 1,100 yards receiving, over 1,100 yards receiving. Yards per out run, 2.78, 95.0 receiving grade. So you look at the numbers there, it was really good. Playing in the Mountain West, though, and I know I just shit on the Mountain West earlier, but he definitely had the numbers there. Loveland has been good. He's more of that receiving guy. His run blocking grade and have been okay, 51 and 54 respectively. And when you're looking at kind of McBride, 58 and 69 in college. So you kind of like that. And he's seen that. McBride has really shown that he can be a run blocker in the NFL level. So where are you going with this one, Randy? Colston Loveland or Trey McBride?
Unfortunately for you, it is Trey McBride.
Hater.
Well, and again, I do think I will give you the caveat of I do think if Loveland was on a different offense this year, this could be a lot closer. But at the tight end position, I am a big fan of the complete tight end. I know we kind of just went on a rant of 2 really more pure pass catching tight ends than anything, but I think that is why I kind of prefer Warren, and that's why I prefer McBride here. As I think it's more that Kittle build of just great at everything. And I think that's always going to be my preference for tight end. But Loveland is great at everything. I don't think he's ever really truly been asked to pass block or run block. Obviously, we had some other tight ends at Michigan that were, tasked with that. So he was able to stay clean on all that stuff. But just purely from what I saw in the route running, the blocking, really leading an offense and everything, I have to take McBride. He's a little bit more prolific. So I do think that's a huge caveat on the offenses and against worse competition for sure. But I just really love Trey McBride's film. It was hard not to take him in first rounds of everything in that draft class and everything. He was just very, very good, and every aspect of the film was just right on point. There was just a little bit of an injury history. He only played 4 games in 2021.
Yeah, I don't want people to think I'm a Trey McBride hater, because I had Trey McBride as my tight end 1 out of summer scouting that year. I watched so much Colorado State film, and that it burned my eyes, but damn it, I was watching Trey McBride play. And then I would watch the broadcasts of Trey McBride. That said, I'm taking Colston Loveland here by like a point. And the reason I'm taking Loveland is what Randy just said. If you put Colston Loveland on that Colorado State team, I think Loveland has very, very similar production. The offense ran through Trey McBride at Colorado State. The offense ran through Blake Corum, and then it didn't run at all this last year. So, sorry, Kevin. But I think there were certainly some factors at play that Loveland couldn't control. I think when you look at Loveland's career arc, something like TJ Hawkinson makes so much sense to me. I think that's what the type of tight end that he can be, where he can be a nice little secondary piece to a really prolific passing attack. The Hawkinson that we saw pre-injury, where he was the number 2 to Justin Jefferson when he first got to Minnesota, that's what I see Loveland being, and I think that's a fantastic top 10 tight end in the NFL. So while I do think Trey McBride is that at this moment, and I'm glad that he hit his ceiling, I think Loveland's starting to get talked about as if he's lesser than Warren quite a bit, whereas I think those guys are pretty darn close to each other, and Loveland and McBride in the same class, I do lean Loveland by just a hair.
Yeah, quickly before we let the Michigan guy take over, I will say, grading skill wise, I do think Loveland is going to grade better. I think he's a better athlete than McBride.
That's
so
part of it.
I believe I don't know if it was testing wise or just our number. I think I had a 6 or 6.5 for McBride. I don't think Loveland will be that low. It's just so
Production,
I do think if they
might even that out though, for what
that's the thing. I do think that on the same board, Loveland would probably be, like you said, inching out McBride, but I prefer the style of McBride. I think is the big thing of this one. This is more of a preference.
Vibes based analysis. That's what we go for here. It's the best.
It's funny as we do this podcast because I know what Christian's vibes are. I don't know what Randy's vibes are when it comes to prospects, but I'm learning them. I'm learning what he likes and what he doesn't like. My man likes me some beefy tight ends. What I'll say with Trey, I just pulled up his RAS score. So relative athletic score, if you guys know Kinley Platt, he talks about that. Really with tight ends, that's the key. And we're looking at that. So Trey McBride ran a 4.58. I think Loveland runs faster than that. You guys think Loveland runs faster than
that? Yeah, not like 4.52.
Yeah,
not by a lot. 4.58 is actually pretty. I didn't realize McBride ran a 4.58. That's pretty good, actually.
He was cooking.
He definitely, man, he was cooking there. 20-yard split was not 2.81 and 10-yard split 1.6. So he did very well. He was elite in those 3 categories when you're looking at that. Vertical, though, at 33, I think Loveland is going to score higher than that on this vertical. And then broad, 909. So you're looking at 7.23 good grade there. And then obviously height, weight did not do him any favors. 18 bench, but I don't know if Loveland's going to get more than that on the bench. It'll be interesting there.
I don't know if Loveland's going to bench. I think he might say, never mind.
That might be a business decision. That's a business decision that he's going to pull there. So his RAS was 810. Christian's our RAS calculator here. What do you think Loveland's is going to be, if you had to guess?
I have it projected right now at I have it at a 9 flat. I think it
Okay.
could be more like an 8.75 or so, but I've just kind of
Okay.
left it at a 9. I think there's a chance that Loveland cruises in the 40 and really like there's a chance. I mean, Loveland
Nine-
has shown like 4.4 speed at
That's what
times,
I'm
I
thinking.
think, and if he goes high 4.4s, I think he probably vaults into that 9+
Yeah.
range. Which you're right, Kevin. That is the most like. That is something that can differentiate good tight ends from great tight ends. There are a few exceptions to the rule. Isaiah Likely having flashes is one of those exceptions, but there aren't many. And like I think of that 2022 class, Jalen Weidermeyer. Everyone remember Jalen Weidermeyer, Devy,
He died,
legend.
man. He died after that 40.
Yeah, and his relative athletic score was very, very bad, and quite frankly, everyone in the 2022 class was pretty bad. That was a really bad tight end class. So, but Loveland I think Loveland's the most athletic tight end in this class. Maybe Mason Taylor's up there, but I think Loveland's probably right there.
I think dead stop floor is probably 7.5 RS for Loveland.
Yeah.
Man, I get a little fun shiver when I hear my Mason Taylor or love child get brought up on the. We'll get into that, baby. He declared. These guys didn't think he was going to declare. Woo, we're coming. We'll get there as soon as we get there. But all right, hey, this was fun talking about this or that. Hey, as always, let us know in the comments what you think in terms of like if you're on YouTube, like hey, where are you at with some of these guys? Just drop in a list. Drop a list for us and go through it and tell us why. Would you rather have Cam Ward, Michael Penix Jr. like we talked about earlier? If you're on the podcast, leave a review. We appreciate you guys when you leave a review. Leave those 5 stars for us. Try to build that up. And any comments help. Whatever they are, let us know what you think. Even constructive. We like constructive comments as well. And tell us what you want to hear. What you guys do get into this draft season. January's coming along. I do constructive better. Christian gets a little heated. Randy, we're not sure yet. Randy just here. I don't even think he's on social media. So
just lurk in the shadows.
Randy's a lurker, which scares the shit out of me. So we're gonna end on that. Randy the lurker as we get into this. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. You guys have a great holidays. We'll see you after the holidays.